If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Kath Bequee, a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of three. Inside my online program, Fitness Mama, I just love helping support women to care for their bodies during pregnancy, prepare their bodies for birth, and support their after-birth recovery, helping them feel confident and strong inside out during this important stage of their lives. In this podcast, join me each week as we dive into all things pregnancy care, childbirth and postnatal recovery, helping you through every step of the journey. It is absolutely possible to feel amazing and confident in our bodies during this motherhood journey, and I want that for you. Come and say hi to me on Instagram at FitnessMama, and let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back to another Spilling the Milk series where I chat through pregnancy journeys, birth stories, and importantly, the afterbirth recovery, the postpartum period. And today I chat with Talissa Triffitt, who is not only a mum of three, but she's also founder and director of one of Australia's largest and most loved lactation brands, Made to Milk. So Talissa started baking lactation cookies in her home kitchen in 2016 after the birth of her first child. And now she has 3 children. And in today's episode, Talissa shares her story about her Caesarean births, her recovery, her mental health, and juggling motherhood and work life with 3 children. So I trust you're going to love this journey, and Talissa really opens up about the joys of motherhood, but also the challenges. So stay tuned. Before we do dive in, I wanted to invite you to join us inside Fitness Mama. Reclaiming your pelvic floor, core and strength safely is the most effective way to care for your body confidently during and after pregnancy. And all of this is available with Fitness Mama. If you've found you're not exercising as much as you'd like to during pregnancy and after birth, perhaps you're busy, or you've lost motivation, or you're not sure how to best be looking after your body. Perhaps you've got pelvic girdle pain, abdominal muscle separation, and you're not sure about the best exercises for you. Or you'd like to get back into running after birth and you want the best Kickstarter possible. Then Fitness Mama is for you. Join us for these convenient, short, easy workouts that you can do from the comfort of your home whilst your bubba sleeps, your toddler runs around, or at the end of a long day at work. There's a free 7-day trial as well, so you've got nothing to lose, everything to gain. Just head to fitnessmama.com and the link is in the show notes. All right, let's get into this episode. Talissa, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's so great to chat.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, absolutely. And you've got a great story to share, just everything around your story around your births and business and motherhood. So, yeah, let's get into it. Can you please introduce yourself for anyone who doesn't know who you are or what you do?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Talissa Triffitt. I am a mum to 3 beautiful children, 7, 3 and 1. Millie, Banjo and Daisy. We live in Shearwater, Tasmania, little beautiful island state. I also own 2 e-commerce brands. So I've got Made to Milk, which is for lactation products for breastfeeding mums. And then I also own the Milk Boutique, which is a breastfeeding activewear brand. So both kind of in the same niche, and they keep me very busy, and that's me.
Yes, and I want to know more about motherhood and how you juggle 3 children, business, life, and all the rest. But the reason I wanted to chat today was because you've got a great story in terms of your births and having Caesarean births. So yes. I'd love to, first of all, dive into this because I feel there's still a bit of a stigma attached to Caesarean births. They're not as, I don't think we talk about it as much as we talk about vaginal births. So thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
And I'm so excited to share about cesarean births because I have absolutely loved my births. Obviously, there's a lot that comes along with having cesarean births, but I absolutely think that they can be positive experiences. And that's why I love talking about them.
Yeah, that's great. So let's start off with were all three babies born by cesarean birth? Was that the initial plan when you set out?
So yes, all three babies were born by cesarean, and that was not the initial plan. No. So we ended up with an emergency cesarean with my first after being in labour for 2 days, and she ended up stuck in my birth canal. Her chin or head was at a funny angle, and they just couldn't get her out. So yeah, if you're happy for me to start with the first birth and how that kind of led into the rest.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I had been in labour for a very long time. And by the time we got to pushing, so I ended up pushing for almost an hour, I think, and it just wasn't happening. And I had doctors working on her, trying all the things to get her out. They were trying to manually move and manipulate her head to get her out, and she just was not coming. So they actually ended up cutting me across and down in a T-section so that they could bring her back up, basically, because she was so stuck at that point. And then because they had done that type of cut, the scar tissue was enough that my uterus, I guess, wouldn't be able to take the impact of going into labour. So for the next couple births, then it was basically straight to a C-section because I couldn't handle contractions. Basically, my body wouldn't be able to withstand the contractions. So I was told, but I was happy to go with that. I didn't want to risk anything. So yeah, so obviously the first birth was quite traumatic, and I came out of that just so depleted, exhausted. It had been a very long time, and as a first-time mum, it wasn't how I expected it to turn out. It wasn't what I went in thinking it would be, but it was also very empowering in a strange way because I was just at the mercy of the people that were looking after me. I went then into my second cesarean knowing exactly what had happened in the first and what I wanted to fix and everything that I had learnt from my first, I was then able to implement into my second. So I felt like because of my first, I could go into my second armed with exactly what I wanted and what I knew I could get out of a cesarean birth. Because you can, and people don't quite know this, or I don't think it's talked about enough, is that you can still have the things that you want in a cesarean birth. You just need to be loud, basically. And I went into my second birth with, the list of everything that I wanted. I wanted delayed cord clamping. I wanted immediate skin to skin. I wanted, all to do with the lights and there was just, a list of things that I wanted that I knew I could get. And obviously that was conversations that I'd had with midwives and professionals beforehand to say, hey, this is what I want out of the birth. I know it's going to look different to what a normal birth is, but these are the things I want. And even on the day, I passed my list over to the midwife that was going to be with me for the surgery. And she said, this is awesome. She said, this is exactly what I wanted for my cesarean birth too. So I'm going to advocate for you to get all of these things. And I remember being in the in the theatre room, and the surgeon was lifting baby up and was ready to cut the cord. And the midwife jumped in straight away and said, no, don't cut it. Hold that baby there. Wait for the blood to drain. And the surgeon was just like, oh, are you sure? We've got to, we've got to keep it sterile or whatever. We need to get baby moving. And she's like, nope, hold that baby there. The baby's perfectly fine, doesn't need any care. Hold it there. And they held it baby there for a decent amount of time before then giving me the skin to skin straight away so that blood could drain from the cord. So yeah, there's just, I think cesarean mums, they have the options that they want. They just need to be loud.
That's so great to hear. And can you talk us through, that was great to hear about the delayed cord clamping. What are some other little changes that you asked for? You mentioned the lighting.
Yes, so dimming the lighting as much as they can. I mean, there are hospital procedures, and especially in theatre, they need lighting but just negotiate with them. I mean, have the conversation. If you don't ask, you don't know. So even if they come back and say no, at least you can say, okay, well, I tried. And there's also music, you can play music. And I didn't actually realize this until after birth, but you can ask to have your own playlist playing for the surgery as well. So that's another thing that you can add. And there's also things in recovery, as with a normal birth. When we're in recovery, I asked to be able to do a breast crawl, which was really amazing. So that's when baby finds the breast themselves and latches themselves. And I asked to be given that time in recovery to be able to do that before we were then moved to the ward. So, yeah.
No, that's great. And compared to your first experience, how were you feeling afterwards?
So much better. So much better about everything too, because, I mean, for my first, labour was the big thing, right? And that's what I was so nervous about, so anxious about. I knew it was going to hurt, all of those things that you worry about as a first-time mum, not knowing what you're walking into and not having experienced it before. And so breastfeeding even wasn't even on my radar going into my first birth. And that ended up being the biggest hurdle for me. Birth was over mine was a longer birth, so over in 2 days or whatever it was. And then breastfeeding was for the next year. So it was probably, I should have focused more on that. And so then when I went into my second birth, I armed myself with all of the knowledge that I needed for my birth. And once that was done and I knew what I wanted, then I was arming myself with all of the knowledge for breastfeeding, and obviously owning breastfeeding brands at that point. I felt a little bit more pressure to make sure I was, over all of the breastfeeding things. But, just arming yourself with knowledge and support, having support people there to help will go a long way.
And I want to dive into that a bit more. So after your first baby, obviously something happened with you that made you want to create this beautiful company that you've got today. Can you talk us through what happened?
Yeah. So after I first gave birth, there was just so many obstacles in our breastfeeding, even as soon as baby was born. I had no idea. I was so naive walking into my breastfeeding journey, and I was lying in my hospital bed being milked by the midwives for colostrum, because I had no idea how to express colostrum, how to hand express, and techniques and what to do. So that was almost a little bit humiliating, lying in my bed having people manipulate my body. And then we ended up with almost full-blown mastitis in the first few days once my milk came in, and then just being super engorged and having cracked and bleeding nipples and not being able to repair them for months. And then once we kind of worked our way through there and found our almost routine, pushed through, I hit about 5 months and I noticed a dip in my milk supply. And I don't think it was for any particular reason. It just happened. And it was a few days where Millie, my first baby, was just so fussy on the boob, and I just couldn't figure out what was wrong. And I just knew that I wasn't giving her enough. And I don't know, it must have been a growth spurt or something that she was going through at the time. She just wanted more. And my body was not making as much as she needed. And after about the third day of her screaming, crying, I ended up in tears and we were just a mess. And I remember I was just at the end of my tether, and I put her down in the living room and screaming, and I walked into my bedroom and I just sat on the floor and I just fell apart. And I jumped on the internet, as you do. You go to Dr. Google, and I was like, what things can help me increase my milk supply? And it wasn't a big thing at the time, but I found a recipe for lactation cookies, and I was desperate to try anything at that point. And so I went out and got the ingredients that were needed, and they were very difficult to find at the time. Brewer's yeast and flaxseed. Brewer's yeast especially, you could only get in specialty health food shops and they were just out of stock everywhere. Anyway, it was a mammoth effort trying to find these ingredients. I brought them home, threw them into my favorite cookie recipe that I already had at home, ate these cookies, and I was like, this is not going to help, but I'm just going to try. And then I kid you not, the next morning I woke up and I was in puddles in my bed. Like I had leaked overnight and I couldn't believe it because I hadn't leaked in that long. And it was just, I went from zero to hero. Like I was on top of the world. I had so much milk. I was then expressing and, you know, getting extra milk even to put in the freezer. And so I was just like, what is this phenomenon? And then I just started baking for local mums in my local mums groups and sharing with anybody that I heard was having issues. I was like, oh my gosh, try these. I'm going to make them for you. And it just kind of snowballed into a business. And then 7 years later, it's like wild. I'm hanging on by a thread.
Oh my gosh, amazing. And Talissa, before I forget to mention, I want you to start a research trial.
Yes.
Where you research the effectiveness, because I just don't think there's any good quality research articles out there. And so, yeah, that's your next job, right?
Yeah. And I think there's some that have been attempted, but it's just like there's so many different factors that go into increasing milk supply too, that it's really hard to know what's the determining factor. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, so many things have an impact on milk supply. So while cookies will or the ingredients that are within the cookies can help for some mums, their issues are completely different and it might be masked by an underlying issue that is only helped by something else. So, it's really, it's a tricky.
It is a tricky one, and that's why research is so difficult. But also, like you can control the controllables, right? And cookies are one of those things where I always was thinking, you know, it's easy for me to eat a cookie, right? It's probably one of the easiest things I can do on my list of things to do to increase milk supply. And it might, so watch this space for research, but it's one of those things. There's no harm and there's potential benefit. And they taste good at the end of the day, right? So
that's it. And I mean, I will always, when somebody comes to me asking for products or recommendations or help, my number one thing is to always recommend a lactation consultant. Go and see a lactation consultant or a health professional that you trust in the first instance. And then depending on what it looks like for you, the cookies might help and I'll suggest products or whatever. But in the first instance, always go and see a health professional first because they will be able to give you tailored advice to what your situation looks like right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now let's discuss. So you've mastered breastfeeding, second time around. You've got the milk. Well, you semi-mastered it. You're working your way through it, as we all do.
Yeah.
You've got the milk. And I guess perhaps more so for your third baby, having 3 babies, 5 Caesarean, you're busy. You know, you've got older children. How was your recovery physically? But I'd also like to know, you know, mentally, emotionally.
Yes.
Yeah. Are there any standout challenges that you had or standout moments?
Yeah. Well, I think just in general, I am a very motivated person and I'm a very impatient person as well. So I always find Caesarean recovery a little difficult because my brain is so far ahead of what my body is. And my brain wants to be up and walking and, you know, I'll be in the hospital room and for all of my births, I've been in quad share rooms. And so these mums are being brought in who have had vaginal births and they're up and walking and I'm like, why can't that be me? But do you know what? I was a lot easier on myself with my third. It was my third time. So I'm like, I know what my body is like. I know how long it needs. And I just got to go with it. It doesn't mean that I don't have my laptop with me in the hospital and I'm still working and, you know, trying to do all the things. But I just was a lot easier on my body. I think what helps too is trying to be as active as you can before going into your Caesarean births.
Yeah.
Yes. So
I'm waving my hands here for it's a podcast, but I'm like, yay.
Yeah, I think that's super important. And I was probably more like that going into my second birth. My third, I was just exhausted, tired, and it was hard. I mean, as it is. But my second birth, we had just moved interstate and I had no choice. And so I was very like on the go right up until before the birth was happening. But I also found that recovery so much easier or just a little bit smoother because my body was in better condition, I think, to then be able to get moving afterwards. And, you know, you'll be hassled by the midwives in hospital to get up and moving as soon as you can. And that's, you know, super important with a Caesarean is just like as soon as you're able, even if you don't feel like you are, just do, you know, take it step by step. Do little movements out of bed, stand up, give yourself a little bit of a stretch back into bed, and then a few hours later take a few steps back into bed. And, you know, yeah, just go bit by bit, but always try and keep moving if you can.
This episode is brought to you by Baby Bee, Australian-owned and designed prams combining quality, safety and style. Not only does Baby Bee let you try their prams at home with free returns for 9 months, yes, that's 9 months, they also offer an industry-leading 3-year warranty for total peace of mind. With thousands of 5-star reviews, around-the-clock customer care, and up to $300 of free accessories with every pram, what are you waiting for? Go visit www.babybeeonline.com and check them out for yourself. And yes, for listeners of the podcast, there is a 20% discount code. Enter FITBEE, F-I-T-B-E-E 20 at checkout, and T's and C's apply. Yeah, it's a real balance, isn't it? Because that early mobilisation is super important.
Yeah.
So I think, especially when you get home, the rest is like you naturally move more anyway because you're at home, especially if you've got other children. And what then becomes more important is having a quick 5-minute lie down, you know, put your feet up, get the weight of gravity off your stomach muscles and let's but it becomes more of a challenge, especially the more children you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's super important to be listening to your body too. I mean, you can feel the pressure when gravity's getting to you. You can feel that pressure. And so you need to be strict with yourself and say, I got to sit down and not just try and push through because pushing through is not going to pay off in the long run.
Yeah. And there's no grey area, I don't think. You either feel good or you don't feel good. There's no warning signs.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
And apart from physically, how was the emotional and all those other challenges or perhaps not that come with having a baby?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, it's really a mind game. It really is a mind game though. I think for me, especially, like I said, my brain wants to be in a place that my body is not ready for yet. And so my brain expects me to be back at work and back going and thinking about all the things. But actually, some of my best products have come from my early postpartum times where I have been just sitting there and going through the motions of things and going, oh, you know what would be really helpful right now? And then going, oh, that's actually a great idea for a product. There's all the emotions that come with it too. I mean, hormones are all over the place, and you just got to go easy on yourself. I think that's the big thing. And what I learned going into my third, then it's just like, all right, I know. Well, I think in pregnancy too. Pregnancy is where I probably struggled the most. And then in those very early postpartum weeks, just because, my body's just not doing what it's used to. And so it's hard for me to grapple with that mentally and emotionally. And then during pregnancy, my emotions are all over the place. Like Cade, my husband, is just kind of like, all right, you need to go and take a walk on your own because you got to let some stuff out. And and I remember like there was one time he came home from work and he's like, go for a walk. And I went and sat on the beach and cried for an hour. And I have no idea what I was crying about. No idea. And that made me cry more because I was like, I look like an idiot right now sitting here on the beach on my lonesome crying for absolutely no reason. But it's just up and down. And I just, learned to accept that that's just what it is. And I just got to go with the flow. And I can't be hard on myself because my body's just doing what it does.
Biggest lesson learnt from becoming a mother?
I mean, there's so many things. I think I have discovered parts of me that I never knew existed. And I think probably the biggest thing that I've learnt is patience. Just have so much patience. It's so difficult. But in all areas too, patience with myself, patience with the kids. And I'm still working on it. I mean, it's a work in progress and I think it always will be. But yeah, just patience. But also I think especially after my third one is to take time for myself. Like I see a therapist once every 2 to 4 weeks, like quite regularly. And she always, or every session, she says to me, so what time have you taken for you? And I'll go, I went to the gym. She's like, nah, that's not it. You're working. That's work. Like you're working hard when you're at the gym. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I went and got my nails done. She's like, yeah, nah, doesn't count. Yeah, even stuff like that. She's like, when have you taken 5 to 10 minutes and just sat there in quiet, thought your own thoughts, read a book, did something that you wanted to do, but you were in peace and quiet? And I was like, oh, it hardly ever happens. And so that's one of my goals constantly. And she always reminds me is to take 5 minutes, go walk out into the backyard, sit on the grass and spend 5 minutes just in your own thoughts, or 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever you can spare, even if it's as little as 5 minutes or as much as 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is, just take some time, sit in the grass, ground yourself and just sit in your own thoughts for a bit. And it's actually crazy how helpful that is.
I love that.
Yeah.
And can I ask, when did you start seeing a therapist and what made you first go?
Yeah, so it depends how in depth we want to get here. Yeah, so I first started seeing her last year, I'm going to say just over 6 months ago, I think. And it was for a lot of things. I had so much going on at once. I mean, obviously I was by then probably about 6 months postpartum, and there was all of that I was dealing with, and then work and business. And we were also building a house at the same time. And then different relationships within a family dynamic too, my extended family, there were relationships that weren't gelling. And so I just needed to offload basically onto somebody. I just had so much coming at me at one time and I didn't know how to cope with it all. And I was drowning, basically quite intensely drowning. And I just needed to offload to a third party, to somebody who is impartial to it all. And she was amazing for that. And then she's like, all right, let's pick up some pieces here and see what we can repair and see what we can work on. And we're still, oh my gosh, still working on them. It's a big work in progress, putting those pieces back together. But it's been so helpful. And oh my goodness, having somebody that you can just offload to has been, unreal.
Do you look forward to your sessions with her?
Absolutely. She's like, at the end of the session, she'll say to me, oh, you probably hated me this session. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have loved this session so much. I honestly, I look forward to it because I find it hard I mean, Cade's amazing, my husband, to offload to some, but even he sometimes he doesn't get it. And he's not, I mean, he's not a woman. He doesn't go through that whole postpartum and up and down of emotion and the load that we take on too, he doesn't get. And so it's nice to have somebody that I can offload to who gets it. Yeah, so I just get so excited. It's time for me to put my burdens on somebody else.
And I think this is the bit of a common thread I am noticing with mums these days. Whether or not it's one child, two, three, it's a fast-paced world we live in. We do a lot, whether or not you're a stay-at-home mum or you're working, whatever it is, we juggle a lot. And I remember listening to social media posts and they're like, motherhood, it's not about a juggle. We need to blend all the different pieces together. And I'm like, no, it is a juggle. Sometimes balls drop and that's okay. You end up picking them up again. And do you feel it's a juggle?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, yes. And I think it's a juggle that will be here for this period of my life and there's no getting away from it. There's no escaping it. It just is what it is for the next little while. And again, I have to be easy on myself or go easy on myself and know that it is just this small period of time in my life. And when I think about my life as a whole, it's just this, time frame that I've only got this amount of time. And I can't do all of the things and be amazing at all of the things. And so it is a juggle for sure. I mean, there's no doubting it is a juggle. And whether you're a stay-at-home mum or a working mum, I mean, in this climate, it's hard to be a stay-at-home mum. You only have a very small window to be a stay-at-home mum, and then it's almost like we have to get back into work or we don't survive. I'm sure that, I don't know facts, but I'm sure the percentage of single income families is on the decline because there's just no other option except to have two incomes going. So, and then we have to bear the brunt of looking after a household plus working plus somehow looking after ourselves in there too. So the burden is heavy.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like we need to finish on a lighter note.
That's pretty intense.
It is intense, but it's good to talk about because, we don't have any solutions. We're all getting it through it the best we can. Yeah. Tell us about your cookies. Nice. Oh, sorry, no, go on. What were you going to say?
No, I was going to say it's nice to know that we're not alone in it too. I mean, there are so many women out there going through the same thing and feeling like their burdens are heavy. And sometimes it's just enough to know that we're not alone in it. And the more that we can talk about it, the more, we can feel not alone.
And I just love the fact that you've found a therapist to help, and whether or not it's a therapist or anyone that can support. I hope that everyone listening has someone they can unburden.
Yes,
to
and it's and it's a little bit daunting in the beginning too, going to see a therapist. I mean, I had siblings who had seen therapists and raved about it, and for years I was like, no, it's not for me. It's not for me. It's not for me. Until I came to a breaking point, and I was like, I've got to go see someone because I can't keep going on how I am. And there's no shame in that too. And I would highly recommend to anyone to go and talk to somebody.
Love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Tell us about Made to Milk.
Made to Milk, my little baby, big baby actually now. So my goodness. So I started Made to Milk with just cookies, and then we have been running for 7 years now, I think. And so, we've expanded the range over time. We've got so much now, probably too much, but we're still always working on new, which is great. And I don't know. It's
Well, how can we find you if we want to learn more about you or your amazing businesses. We need to say multiple businesses now. So
yeah, it's wild. I'm still wrapping my head around it as well. So Made to Milk, I mean, we are big on social media. So that's where we kind of hang out. We hang out in stories. We have a lot of fun. My team here at the warehouse is awesome, and I'm very lucky that they are happy to be thrown into team challenges and all that kind of thing. And we have a lot of fun in our social media. So Made to Milk is just at Made to Milk on Instagram. The new one, The Milk Boutique, is at The Milk Boutique on Instagram. And then you can find me personally. I'm Talissa.Triffitt is my personal page on Instagram too. So
great. And I'll have all the links in the show notes.
Yes, and also happy to offer a discount code for any listeners too on both the Milk Boutique and Made to Milk. So we'll pop that discount code in the show notes too.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. Thanks.
Good.
Thanks so much for joining me today. Great to hear your story and your journey and everything that comes with motherhood.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to talk about it, actually. I got to relive some of those moments. It's great.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, well, we'll catch you soon. And before I sign off, remember my team and I will be putting together the show notes for this episode with all the links, including how to connect with Talissa at fitnessmama.com/podcast. And don't forget, if you want to join us for a free 7-day trial, head to the link in the show notes. That's it, everyone. Have a fabulous day, and I look forward to you joining me next time for another episode of the Fitness Mama podcast. Thanks for listening to the Fitness Mama podcast, brought to you by the Fitness Mama freebies found at www.fitnessmama.com/free. So please take a few seconds to leave a review, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to take a screenshot of this podcast, upload it to your social media, and tag me at Fitness Mama so I can give you a shout out too. Until next time, remember, an active pregnancy, confident childbirth, and strong postnatal recovery is something that you deserve. Remember our disclaimer, materials and contents in this podcast are intended as general information only and shouldn't substitute any medical advice, diagnosis or treatment. I'll see you soon.